Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board. And this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for September 8, 2020. This meeting, as all meetings during the health emergency, is being held remotely. We are using the Zoom platform, and this meeting is also being recorded. A quorum of the Select Board is participating from their respective remote locations. First of all, I understand that officials of Boston College are available to answer questions from the board about concerns that people in the community have expressed to Select Board members concerning students returning to campus and COVID risks. I'd like to hear from them after announcements and updates from the Select Board, but before general public comments. So I'll start with just reporting that the September 11th Remembrance last Friday was very successful. There was a live ceremony that attracted what seemed like about 100 people, and a live stream by BIG. There was, for the most part, good social distancing, and only a few people failed to wear a mask. We heard statements or presentations from Senator Cynthia Crean by videotape and from Representatives Tommy Vitolo and Nika Elugardo, who were there in person. We also were very fortunate to have 3 family members of Brookline 9/11 victims participating in the program. Peter Moyer, brother of New York City firefighter Manuel Del Valle, who graduated from Brookline High School. Maureen Gilligan, the sister of Gerard Duvon, who was in the audience, and Patricia Hoban, and a sister of John Brett Cahill, who spoke by video. Tracy Clark, a Brookline resident and daughter of Chovy Hoy, performed a beautiful and fitting rendition of America the Beautiful. Like most things in Brookline these days, the event would not have been possible without the help of Brookline Interactive Group, and particularly for this event, Corbin Rydell. We thank them for that and for all they do. And the tape of the event is available on BIG's YouTube channel. Any other announcements, comments from Select Board members?
Well, I'll just mention that the census is making a last push. The last date at this point is September 30th. There are rumors that it might be extended, but not many people hold out hope for that. So we are pushing. We are still down in Brookline. Overall, our rate is only 63.7%. Not as good as 2010 even. So we're really under the gun here to get it done. So I urge anyone who has not filled out their census, who could be listening to this program, to complete it at my2020census.gov. And on that website, you can also find phone numbers, which help you if English isn't your first language or you'd rather fill it out in a different language. There are like 12 languages there for you to choose from. So I urge you to complete your census now. Thank you.
Okay, any other updates or comments?
Sure. I'll just note that the work of the Select Board's Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline continues. We meet every Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Members of the public are encouraged to watch. I will say that this week in particular, you might be interested to know that we're going to delve deeper into some of 2 things. One is calls for service, why folks in Brookline call 911 and directly call the police department to understand community needs around public safety, and also crime data as well. And we'll be supported in that effort through former Chief Dan O'Leary, who is supporting both the task force as well as the Committee on Policing Reforms that's chaired by Chair Bernard Green. And I'll also note that we are going to be collaborating jointly more information to come, but on this September 30th public hearing that I know the chair has mentioned before. But we'll send out more information about that, and I'm sure talk that up in the next couple of weeks. But I'm very interested to hear what members of the public have to say about policing in Brookline, and in particular, for our purposes on the Reimagining Task Force, where would you like us to focus our efforts in terms of with respect to reimagining around public safety? So more information to come on that. I'm sure the chair has more to say about the Committee on Policing Reforms.
I do. The Committee on Policing Reform will also be meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. And on the agenda will be a discussion of the presentation by Officers Pilgrim and Walker that we held last week. I think that's going to be an interesting discussion by members of the committee. And we'll also be discussing the upcoming educational series, online educational series. We're going to have a number of videos that will be posted on our website, or web page, I'm sorry, of various issues that relate to policing, to give people a background not only on policing, but also on the Brookline Police Department, history, the types of things they do, reasons for certain things, and some of the controversies that have risen over time. So that should be an interesting meeting. So, any other comments from the Select Board?
And if I can just note briefly for anyone that can't make either meeting, these are all, thankfully, streamed and recorded to watch later by Brookline Interactive Group. So sometimes it takes a day for it to end up on the YouTube page for Brookline Interactive Group, but they're all ending up there. And so I encourage you, if you want to watch back to the very first meetings, you can do that and catch up. And so if you can't be there live, you can still watch later.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Mr. Manscoya.
I just want to add a couple of words to what you said about the observance on Friday of the, the September 11th anniversary. First of all, I'll pay a compliment to you. Our chair presided and did an excellent job of sort of capturing the solemnity of the occasion. We had a particular speech that made a deep impression on me because I didn't know this about our state representative, Tommy Vitolo. But he told a story which I'm going to encourage him when this rolls around next year to see if he can have the text of his remarks published as, an opinion piece or a column, perhaps in the local paper. He has a story to tell which is so moving. I was amazed that he got through it with his composure intact. I was having a hard time with my composure. I won't go into any further details. I just hope Tommy gets to tell that story in more places and at more times, because it's a great story about the impact that September 11th had on all of us, but also had overseas and around the world. Representative Elagardo, she spoke also, was terrific. We had a firefighter who spoke, was terrific. And the story behind the story, and Chair Green, if you would correct me if I leave out anything in this, is that quite honestly, people were a little bit disappointed a year ago that we didn't have a more robust observance of the September 11th anniversary, and volunteers stepped up. And this is so often the case in Brookline, that volunteers rise to the occasion. And we had a couple of volunteers who then sort of got in touch with the select board and got in touch with others and helped to pull together a kind of a revived effort this time around. And it was really meaningful to all those who were privileged to be part of it. And I just want to point out that the obvious, which is that next year's observance will be the 20th anniversary year of this. And I know that they're already thinking about how they can once again do justice to this occasion and have an appropriate observance in Brookline. It means a lot to people.
Yeah, thank you, John. It means a lot to people, but especially to the firefighters. I mean, I really got the sense that firefighters who turned out in large numbers. We're very appreciative of the fact that we, set aside this time to participate in their ongoing remembrance event and adding to their program with our remembrance event. So, any other questions or comments or updates? Okay, Devin, I understand that we have representatives of Boston College in the waiting room, the green room on this Zoom platform. Can you admit them in? Devin?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Okay. That's Mr. Bill Evans. Okay, are you the only one, Mr. Evans?
No, I think we have a couple more. I think this system's new to us, so I think bear with us a couple minutes. There should be a couple others coming on, I hope.
Yes, it looks like everyone who is here at this time has been promoted.
Like Jean Levesque's supposed to be on, and maybe George Aries.
I'm here.
All right, George, you're here.
I don't see Jean or Tom at this point, but I'll keep an eye out for them.
Okay, introduce yourself. I understand that you wanted to make a presentation before the board grills you on our concerns and the information that we would like to hear from Boston College.
Okay, George, you want to start, and I'll follow up on what we're going to do.
I'm definitely willing to do do an introduction and introduce myself. Billy, I think we might want
Jean.
Tom or Jean.
Yeah, I think Jean's supposed.
They're
I
going to do the
agree,
presentation.
I just don't want to keep them too long.
Send her a text.
All right. My name is George Airy. I'm the Associate Vice President of Student Affairs here at BC. Specifically, I work with all of the housing portfolio on campus. So the little over 7,000 students that we have on campus. And then I work with our off-campus population and some of the crisis management when it involves on-campus students and some of those pieces. And then, as I like to say, my title also has special projects involved, so I do whatever my boss tells me to. So here I am.
And I'm Dr. Doug Camo, the newly minted Director of University Health Services and Primary Care Sports Medicine as of July 1st. So walking into the nice pandemic that we are in. So I recently came from Boston Medical Center and Boston University as well. So happy to be here.
And I'm Bill Evans. I'm the Director of Public Safety. I've been here for 2 years. My role is obviously this, keeping the students safe on campus and obviously off campus, and also dealing with the COVID incidents and keeping our students safe as far as off campus goes too. So we're here obviously to address any concerns you might have over this COVID issue.
Joe Hurley, I'm the University General Counsel, and I'm happy to answer any questions, particularly about the Pine Manor BC merger.
Excuse me, Mr. Hurley, we don't hear you very well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Joe Hurley, General Counsel. Is that any better, Nancy?
That's a little better, yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you have any opening statement?
Jean?
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm
Oh,
Jean
I'm sorry.
Levesque. I'm the Director of Government Relations. No, that's fine. Tom is going to be joining us. He's just having some difficulties getting on, who's the Vice President for Government and Community Affairs. And we just wanted to thank the town administrator, Mr. Kleckner, and the entire board, the select board, for being on this call with us tonight. And we clearly wanted to talk about our proposal to the town of Brookline to use beds in buildings 1 through 6 in the East Village of the Pine Manor campus for isolation for students at Boston College. And I think with that, we have been in touch with Dr. Jett back on an original call with DPH in August 21st, had a follow-up conversation with him on August 28th, submitted our proposal, which I believe the select board has a copy of. And just wanted to proceed. I know we wanted to be as brief as possible and just get into an overview or answer questions from the select board. So with that, I basically throw it back to either go directly with questions or to have Doug just maybe give an overview, or George of our operations proposal for those beds.
Well, I guess we'd like to hear both that as well as some understanding or some description of the efforts or the plans you have and that you're carrying out with respect to students living off campus, not just in Brookline, but in the surrounding communities. That's the big concern of a lot of people here in town, and I'm sure in Newton and Boston also.
I can speak about
Yeah,
testing
thanks.
and whatnot about so as far as testing and strategizing about off-campus students, we have had some off-campus student positives cases, and we've had aggressive contact tracing, and we work directly with the contact tracing collaborative as well in sort of this symbiotic relationship where we get the positive test first, call the student, and then also make sure all roommates are actually quarantined as well and retested aggressively. We've identified hotspots in collaboration, mainly with Boston, because that's where the vast majority of our off-campus positive cases have been, to actually screen entire neighborhoods of students as well, to make sure that we are keeping any type of disease contained for those off-campus students. I know that Gene and Tom and Chief Evans have worked very hard to help contain any type of off-campus parties as much as possible. And that's where we're at from that standpoint. So the same would be said for Brookline or for Newton. Any type of off-campus positivity, we aggressively contact trace and work with the CTC as well.
Could I ask a question, Bernard?
Of course.
Okay.
Please.
I would like to ask a question about your testing program. Do you do your own testing on site? Do you have a testing facility?
That's a great question. So we do have an on-campus lab. We're pending CLIA certification for that. So once it is certified, we'll be using it as an on-campus lab in conjunction with the Broad Institute as well. All of our testing currently is going to Broad Institute, but otherwise we have built an on-campus lab as well.
So how long does it take that institute, once it receives the test, to give you the result?
So typically Broad is 6 to 26 hours once they receive the test. So in order to help enhance that result time period, we actually send our tests to them multiple times a day with a courier service, and also Chief Evans, BCPD, has been taking some samples over in off hours as well, so we can aggressively identify those patients.
And how many, this may not be a question that you can answer, but how many students live off campus? You said 7,000 on campus, but you didn't name a number for the on campus, but you didn't name a number for the off campus.
I believe the number is about, like, right now, probably 1,200. Is that correct, Gene? Or
Yes, on average over I've been at BC 17 years, we have between 1,000 and 1,300 students living in off campus. And those are primarily in the 02135 Brighton zip code.
Is that undergrad and graduate students?
Undergraduate students, and we provide no housing for graduate students. So
how many graduate students?
I could go back and check on that. I just can't give you that number off the top of my head. We have approximately 6,000 graduate students. We have a total of 14,000 in total enrollment. They're not all in Brighton though, but I could get that information and follow up with you.
Do you know how many live in Brookline?
I do not.
Would you get us that information?
Yes, I can.
You're mandated, as I understand it, or required to report any positive cases to the Department of Public Health, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, so any test that goes to Broad Institute, that directly goes into the Maven. Maven is the main record for the Department of Public Health for the Massachusetts state government. We also do a personal phone call to the director of the Department of Public Health as well for whichever zip code the patient lives in. And as you're aware, our university lies in 3 zip codes. So, I've spoken to Dr. Jett in the past, and then also to Julia Gunn from Boston, and then also to Nancy from Newton as well.
So you have had positive cases in Brookline.
We had one positive case of a patient who flew in and did not see anybody. He actually flew in from Italy, and his family owns an apartment in the area. He came from the airport, got tested, and was in his apartment, which is a rather large apartment, and he was appropriately contact traced, and he's healthy and he cleared isolation, I want to say probably last week sometime. So he never had it. He was asymptomatic positive. So
I see. And when you test, do you know how many graduate students live off campus?
how many graduate students live off campus? I
You
believe
have
that
9,000 graduate students, you said.
No, we have approximately 9,000 and 9,200 undergrads, and we have approximately 550 to 6,000 graduate students. We have a total enrollment of 13,000. And I just don't have the information on graduate students. We can get you a breakdown of who lives in Brookline for undergrad and grad. We traditionally do not have, most of our undergraduates tend to live in the 02135. We do have some in Newton, not a large percentage, but we have some. And then graduate students, because we do not provide housing for graduate students, other professional schools live throughout Boston and Newton and Brookline. And I'm sure there are some in Brookline, and we can get you those numbers. I just don't have them off the top.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And just one more question, I'll let my other board members have a crack at you. So when you report to the State Department of Public Health, I believe that the State Department reports then to Brookline if there are any cases. But do you also independently report to Brookline?
Yeah, that's correct, ma'am. We report both to the Massachusetts State Department of Public Health, and also, so in your case, it would be Dr. Jett because he's in charge. So I've spoken to him, and also Barbara Wesley, I believe is his nurse deputy as well. So I have both of their contact information, and if somebody were to test positive, I throw them a text message and say, hey, give me a time to talk, and then we talk it out the day of the positive case.
And who is doing the contact tracing in that situation?
So right now we have a combination. We start the contact tracing process because.
Or you just muted yourself.
Oh, said the host muted me. So the contact tracing, so right now when we get a positive test, we're a 24-hour operation because we're the only infirmary, and I think in New England that's open 24 hours a day. So whereas other schools have their lab results come just from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we're getting lab results at say 8 o'clock at night. So we're aggressively calling those patients, isolating them, and then also inferring where their roommates are. So depending on the quarantine situation, if somebody does not have a private bathroom in their vicinity, so if they're not in a suite on campus, if they're in a what we call a conventional college living situation where the bathroom's in the corridor, we would quarantine quarantine the roommate elsewhere in university housing, and then also isolate out the other person independently in university housing. So we do all that and also ask them about their 48 hours prior while we have them on the phone, and then also tell them that the contact tracing collaborative is going to be reaching out to them as well. So it's almost like a double check. So we have successfully quarantined and then subsequently tested a lot of those individuals. And then at the same time, so if somebody came back at 11 p.m., I wouldn't call Dr. Jett at 11 p.m. I would call him at probably 8 in the morning, but essentially he's told right away as much as possible. And then the contact tracing collaborative will get that information. There's typically like probably an 8 to 10 hour lag time when the lab test comes from the Broad Institute to the actual Maven network. So that's why we're being more aggressive with it to identify and isolate people.
The globe
Thank
is.
you. I'm going to give my other select board members an
Let
opportunity.
me just ask for clarification. The Globe is reporting that the state stepped in and took over your contact tracing.
No, I
Sounds like
understand.
you're saying that you're still doing some. So explain,
Yeah.
what the system is.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially we are working with the contact tracing collaborative, and that contact tracing collaborative is a unit that's from the state of Massachusetts. And they felt that it would be best because we're in 3 jurisdictions to work more closely with them. So we've always been working with the contact tracing collaborative, but even more so now. We report daily to them, and we are also doing our own isolation and quarantine because that's what they requested us to do as well, to continue doing what we're doing, because the city of Boston is very pleased with the aggressiveness we've done with our cases. And so that's why we're working directly with them. So the contact tracing collaborative has always been on top of Boston College and the other universities that they're working with. So I don't, the Globe report is erroneous, I would say, like in the sense that they weren't necessarily taking over. They've always been a part of us. So
Thank you.
I hope that helps clarify things for you.
Mind if I jump?
Of course.
Okay. I wanted to ask a little bit about just digging more a little bit to the recent community spread. If it was up to many people who live in our community, the colleges that are in and around Brookline wouldn't have opened. As you know, I also work in higher education, you may not know that, but universities always try but never quite succeed in controlling off-campus gatherings, despite messaging and despite whatever consequences there are. And for community members, the failure to control those on-campus gatherings, generally speaking, is a nuisance. But in this case, failure to control those off-campus gatherings, the results could be much more dire. And that's what a lot of people in our community are very concerned about. And you're talking to a group of folks that have been working, since March, at least, since March to try to keep our numbers low. And they have been very low, relatively low compared to other parts of the Commonwealth and other areas in the country. And so there's a lot of concern about this issue of community spread. And some of this is the predictable result of returning students to campus. Like folks like me and some other members of the board were not at all surprised to see the news that there was a gathering and many people contracted COVID, and potentially now that could be spread elsewhere. Like none of us were surprised at that. My question for you all is, you've done the messaging, you've put the consequences out there, and yet and still we had this spread. My question is, what are you doing now differently on the other side of this news that's going to give us hope that something like this isn't going to happen again next week or in the weeks to come? Halloween weekend, which will be coming up, which is a great time for gatherings, I understand. And other times, what confidence can you give us that you're doing something now differently than you were doing before this spread that's going to prevent it from happening again?
Well, good. Well, again, Chief Evans, I can let you know that, we're working with the Boston Police Department, especially that's where the majority of our students are, to help, watch for the rather large gatherings. And we have, Tom Morgan, who's one of our deans, Steve Montgomery, they're out every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, most nights walking, making sure these parties don't develop at all. And I can tell you, the school has really stepped up. Where we've seen parties, there's been some real strong disciplinary action. Many kids have been removed from their housing, mostly on campus, whether it be the mods or up in Newton with the freshmen. So I think there's been a firm message that if the kids don't obey, they're going to be removed. So I think that's something I've seen that's new. I won't say zero tolerance, but they've really sent many messages, but they're backing up the message that we won't tolerate kids violating what we ask them to do.
And what's BC's tipping point? What's the point at which you say there's been X amount of spread or positive cases in a certain time frame, and you say this isn't safe to keep students on campus anymore, and we need to send everybody back?
I think I get this question a lot, and being a sports med physician as well, like I always liken it to what's the magic number with concussions. So there's no magic number with concussions, similar to there's no real magic number with COVID. And the way we're taking about it is we have a targeted surveillance in which we're trying to essentially early identify the contact traces. So even though we may have, so say if we have a little uptick in numbers because of our targeted surveillance testing, they may be up for a temporary few days, but then because we're getting them right away from the early onset contact tracing and quarantine, then we're hopefully going to be able to contain that. And part of that targeted surveillance is also looking at positivity rates in dorms, screening the dorms that have positivity rates to essentially allow us to keep the campus open and to keep the campus safe.
May I chime in?
Sure.
So I want to actually say something a little bit different than what we just heard on this, in the sense that I was surprised. I expected more of Boston College. I wonder if you officials from Boston College were aware that in Brookline, when students began coming back to Boston College, we had managed to get incidents of COVID down to 3 cases, 4 cases, sometimes 5, 6, or 7 cases a week. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cases a week in a population of 59,000 people. And I've heard mentioned that your total population is something like 13,000. And here you come back to campus with the advantage of 3 months of experience of learning from the experience we've gone through in this country, 3 months to figure out how to prevent outbreaks. And within days, if not weeks, we're back to the worst kind of level of outbreak from the worst days of this crisis, multiplied exponentially. 67 cases in 1 week in a campus population and off-campus population of about 13,000, the highest it ever reached in Brookline's population of 59,000 was something like 70 cases. So compare those numbers. At its worst in Brookline, a town that has 4 times the population that we're talking about at Boston College, at its worst, we had the same number as you had within a week or two after students had returned to campus in a population of 13,000. And I did expect more of Boston College. I didn't expect to be reading, as we subsequently did, headlines like "We were lied to," a statement by a student, statements like, it feels like a petri dish that they don't put under the microscope. That same student saying that she learned of she shares a dormitory floor with more than 25 other young women, 3 of whom tested positive within a week. And here's her quote: "I'm sharing a bathroom with them, and the school has told me nothing. They haven't even reached out to see if I should get another test." And here's another quote. This is in reference to the fact that you had an outbreak of 13 cases on the swim team. This is from someone saying, "The news came from the Boston Globe. It didn't come from any institutional staff at our own school. As captain, I'm responsible for other members of my team. And the fact that I was not aware of this, that nobody else was aware of this, is really frustrating." So we're reading that kind of response from students who are experiencing this COVID outbreak. And then we're seeing in our neighboring community of Newton, a mayor outraged at the lack of communication and at the fact that as far as she can tell, Boston College's plan, now that they've failed to prevent an outbreak on their campus, is to perhaps use off-campus housing for quarantining and isolation. And she has moved to say, don't even think about it. To which, we then find out in Brookline, the response is, well, we've got an alternative plan. It's to move them to Brookline. This does not inspire confidence. And I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, but we expected a lot more respect for the fact that Brookline worked hard to get our incidents down to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cases a week. And I think as good neighbors, Boston College owed us more than to allow for an outbreak of the level that you've had. So that's my comment, and I will leave it at that. If you wish to respond, that's fine.
Well, if you're not going to respond, I think one thing that you should give us some information and assurance on is the location of, or the use of, Pine Manor College for the students being isolated. I mean, what type of protections are there at that campus? I know it's an isolated location, so maybe it's a good spot, but what type of protections are in place to ensure that the students being isolated there don't, I don't know how they do it, but cause infection outside in the community?
Well, from a public safety, I can let you know, and then maybe George Aries can talk, but I know where we're currently isolating and quarantine. We have a police officer there at all times. We have cameras set up there. And I think so far we had one student try to leave the quarantine, and he's been sent home to Ohio for violating that. So when we transport a student to this location, he's watched, he's fed, and he's allowed no visitors other than facilities who clean and deliver food. But we would do the same with the East Village up in Pine Manor. We have a police officer, BC, stationed there all the time. We've already put 20 cameras. So we have our eyes and ears that come right into our dispatch that we will watch. So once those kids go in, they have no permission to come out. They have no permission to have visitors or any type of gatherings. And so, we've been very successful at our current location, which directly abuts a lot of neighborhoods and apartments, and we have received 0 complaints. Pine Manor is a lot more isolated, but we would put the same precautions there to make sure when we put the student in there, other than health services, facilities, and dining, feeding him, nobody else will go near them. George, maybe you can talk?
Oh, sure.
Is George on?
Do you want to say something first and then I'll jump in?
Yes, I will let you talk, but I just wanted to loop back and just address Select Member Vince Goyek's comments about the communication with our other host communities, because we have had multiple conversations with both Newton and Boston and with Brookline when we were looking to put the proposal together. So I just we obviously started in Newton and Boston because those were our primary locations. So I will, scoot back to that. But if you want to talk about the actual other parts of the plan that we submitted, that would be fine.
I'll
And
jump
I
in.
also want to piggyback on Gene as well to just comment before George goes into the dorm stuff. When you look at our actual positive test rate, probably about 85% of our cases came from the contact tracing of 3 off-campus events. And I apologize, with your comments that, with you made about disappointment, when we look at the swim team and other things like that, unfortunately we have HIPAA that we can't really tell people about positivity. And with the swim team, that's something that was not from the pool. You can't get COVID in a pool with chlorine. There's multiple articles and CDC saying that, and that swim team actually, was not even training at the point of where they had the positivity cases. So they were linked to another off-campus site. And unfortunately, because they're all at an off-campus site, they came into contact with it and tested positive. When you look at our actual numbers this week so far, we're back down to 0.4%, which is under the Massachusetts state average and under Boston. When you look at our numbers over the weekend and actually towards the end of the week, we trended down from Wednesday and Thursday. I admit we had 2 really rough days with positive cases, but when you look at the overall numbers and the overall tests that we've done, we're at 0.44% for the overall total numbers tested. And then if you look at the actual undergrads tested, we're still under 1% as well. So, we're trying our best to keep the disease contained. And, I just want to let you know that that's on my mind every day. I pretty much live here now. So we're trying to essentially make sure we have early identification of patients, and none of our athletic tests were athletically related due to practices or anything like that as well. So. Thank you.
I can speak to
I don't think you addressed the issue. Nobody said that this was caused through contact in a pool. It was, I'm going to take your word for it, that it was caused by an off-campus gathering, if that's what you're saying. Is that satisfactory that, that you brought students back and we're not able to control off-campus gatherings to the extent that you got 13 members of the swim team come down with COVID? Is that a level of performance by Boston College's administration that you folks sort of were set ahead of time? Well, if it turns out that our measures are not sufficient to prevent 13 members of the swim team from getting COVID, I guess that's okay. Did anybody say that? I doubt it. And yet I don't think the measures were taken that would prevent it. It's self-evident that the measures weren't taken to prevent it. And now I worry that you're kind of sloughing it off. You're sort of saying, hey, it wasn't part of their athletic activity, so what could we do about it? Well, the point is you had all these months to figure out what to do about it, and didn't do what was necessary to prevent that kind of outbreak and other outbreaks from happening. And that's the message we're trying to impart here.
I'm going to jump in, and I completely understand that, and I empathize with that as well. I run all of the housing on campus and the off-campus student life program. I think there's a couple of different pieces. I'll walk you through what it is that we're doing. But to go back to the idea that we're going to bring 15,000 college students back to campus and we're not going to have any COVID positives, I believe slightly unrealistic. I have peers all over the country that are experiencing hundreds of cases. My previous institution was the University of North Carolina, and currently they have 1,197 cases and the town of Chapel Hill is smaller than Brookline. So we're going to have cases. How we manage them is what is the big thing. Every community is having cases right now. I'm from a town in Maine that has 197 people and they have 3 cases. We're going to have cases, but how we manage them is going to be the important piece, and how we're trying to prevent them is going to be the important piece for us. We have, from a housing standpoint, we have a very structured protocol of how we're managing our students. We have requirements in place for wearing masks. We have requirements in place for cleaning. We have requirements in place for our students for any social gatherings. We have done the same thing and replicated those off campus. And those social gathering expectations, the end result is very, very significant to a student. They lose an entire semester if they are found having been at a social event off campus. They also, if they host that event, they lose not only their semester, but they lose also the classes that go with it. They're not allowed to take online classes. And on top of that, they lose the following year's housing on campus. So our juniors live off campus. With that reality, senior year, we bring 98% of our juniors back on campus for their senior year. Senior year is the holy grail at Boston College. And we're taking not only that semester, but we're also taking your holy grail senior year experience away. There's a significant amount of stake involved in that for our students. Not every student is going to listen. Billy brought up a point with a young man from Ohio. He didn't violate our COVID, our quarantine reality. He was a conduct case because he refused to wear a mask, and we immediately discharged him from the institution. He had one night in our quarantine facility because of the fact that he refused to wear a mask. He broached that. The following day, he left. So we're taking it very seriously. And I want to also highlight, for me, I have 350 staff members, many of which live in the surrounding community. If I can't keep Boston College up and running as a housing program, I'm going to have to lay people off. I don't want to do that. And I'm sure, pardon my expression, hell not going to do that because of a student who's refusing to wear a mask. That kid can go home. They don't have to be here. So especially if they're going to impact the livelihoods of our staff members and their fellow students. So I take it very, very passionately and have a very vested interest in making sure this works. What we're doing
George,
with the, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, you mentioned prevention, but I haven't heard that, that you're taking very serious measures. For instance, Boston University is testing their students mandatorily 3 times a week. And when they first get there, they're also testing them vigorously. So, and if you test them the first day and they turn out negative, who knows, they could be positive the next day, which is why they're doing 3 times a week. So what are you doing in that regard in terms of testing? Because you will never prevent the spread unless you catch the cases early, isolate people early, and hope and do other things, prevent parties especially, and have facial mask wearing and social distancing to prevent cases in the first place.
Yep. So I can speak to the mask wearing and those pieces. Dr. Doug is the medical expert, and I'm not going to try and pretend that I fit that role. From a preventative reality, we've added in, just as you said, we're addressing parties. We've shrunken down the ability for social gatherings on campus, so that we have eliminated the vast majority of opportunities for our students to interact with one another in any form of large group. We have required mask wearing. So that's built in, and we have my particular staff and the student affairs staff are required to engage anyone they see without a mask. We all carry masks with us. So if we see somebody, we're handing them a mask. If we have continued issues with that, we're also putting them through the conduct system. Again, they have the opportunity to lose their semester and their right to be on campus or off campus. So all of those pieces we're doing very similar. My friends down at BU are doing very similar stuff that we're doing. From a
How
testing
often are you
standpoint,
testing?
that's Doug. Doug?
Well, first of all, I actually came from Boston University, so they're actually not testing every student 3 times per week. They have a tiered system of there are 4 tiers, and the high contact students are getting tested randomly 3 times a week. Then tier 2 is being tested twice a week. Tier 3 is tested maybe once, and then tier 4 is not at all. And so our testing strategy is more of one of targeted surveillance. And then, as I mentioned before, we've escalated our testing as well, even though it's only been advertised as 1,500 tests per week. One week we did 4,322. Last week, because of the Labor Day holiday, we did a little bit less than that. We're doing 5,000 tests this week. So we're actually increasing our testing based on, what we call targeted surveillance. So it's more of the hospital philosophy of that. So it's, the hospital philosophy, right now, if you walk into Boston Medical Center or Mass General and you're asymptomatic, you're not going to get a COVID test. They're only treating symptomatic patients. So I rounded on the COVID floors for 2 months in March and April at Boston Medical Center. I got tested 0 times. And because if you have the appropriate PPE, you have the appropriate, and you do your distancing from everybody, you're not going to get it. And, that's good mask wearing, et cetera. So with the appropriate mask and social distancing, we would be fine as a university. And that's why we keep on really implementing that message. So that's why at the beginning of the season, we tested everybody who was going to step foot on our campus this year. So we did 18,000 tests, roughly. Technically, looking at the numbers on my other screen here, about 17,750 tests for the first couple weeks. And then subsequently, we tested all the high-risk state folks a second time. So that's very similar to what Boston University was doing with their strategy as far as testing the high-risk staters a second time when they first came back to campus. And then subsequently, we've done a targeted surveillance testing with anybody. So this is a targeted surveillance with high contact people at the university. So that would be anybody in residential life, dining services, BC police, and this includes student dining people, student residential assistants who are students, health services. And then subsequently, that doesn't include the tests that we do on any type of contact trace people as well. So doing the aggressive contact tracing, that's how we've caught the majority of our positives, because realistically, when you look at our actual surveillance testing, we've only popped maybe 10 or 12 on surveillance testing, even though it's targeted surveillance. It's more the contacts and the symptomatic patients that have been positive. So that's how we're actually taking away, because the second those people either test positive, or if they are quarantined, they are getting away from your community.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry.
I've been very patient to ask this one, hopefully just technical question. Are positive tests that occur in Brookline with your student population, are they counted towards Brookline's numbers, or are they counted elsewhere?
I believe according to the CTC, the Contact Tracing Collaborative, and the different Department of Public Healths, so if a student ends up being isolated at Pine Manor College, let's say, it's wherever they took the test, wherever their home address is. And I don't believe we have that many people actually living in Brookline, from an undergraduate standpoint. And, when you look at our test results, only 2 have been non-undergrads. So we had 1 staff member and 1 graduate student, even though they're all being tested weekly as well in our high contact surveillance. So it'd be whatever their address, physical living address is in the Boston, Brookline, Newton area, that would be where their test result would count as a positive.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'd like to ask Dr. Jett if he has any comments with respect to what we're hearing. And then later on, Chief Morgan, whether he has any comments.
Well, good evening. No, I don't have any comments. I have worked with Boston College now for over a month. I've worked with Dr. Doug for a while, so they have alerted me if they had any positive cases. They actually text me, and I follow up with them. You know, I would just say this. So Pine Mountain College is licensed by the select board. And so we are doing our lodging inspections now, and all of them come before you by December. If there was a serious outbreak, you do have jurisdiction to stop people from being housed at Pine Mountain College. And Brookline Board of Health also has jurisdiction and can pass a Board of Health regulation if need be, if there was an outbreak at Pine Mountain. And so in the past, in the spring, we did have cases of COVID that were isolated at Pine Mountain. And we did the contact tracing directly and monitor the students there. So at this time, you know, since we only have one case, I feel fairly confident on the plan they have going forward, as long as they stay in contact with me and alert me as to what's going on. And if there's any type of issues, I feel fairly confident that I could work with the group and ensure that we don't have an outbreak in Brookline.
The only thing I would add, as far as I inquired from the chair, is that we have historically not many BC students living in Brookline. I mean, based on a loud party complaint calls, it was a small number that were housed on Strathmore Road and some others on Englewood and some on up at Beacon Street. They're historically based pre-COVID. The minimal amount of students from BC undergrads on living in student type housing. There may be additional that commuter students that still live at home and commute to the campus. But as far as that, the numbers have always been historically low. Additionally, I did have a conversation with Chief Evans past Friday about the plans up at Pine Manor. And as far as that being an isolated area versus some of the other areas where they're doing the housing, especially on Mount Hood Road and Brighton, I believe that their plans is a workable plan as far as on the public safety side with the police department. Any questions on that?
I understand that Pine Manor does not have any students other than those in isolation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's going to be correct. I mean, they have 9 students up there now that we're with, and I think we're trying to find them housing on BC. So the only ones up there, I think, would be the isolated kids. And, you know, just to get back to the chief's, you know, message, you know, we've always worked great with the Brookline PD. Obviously, you got a great police department. And if there's any issues, just like Newton and like Boston, of any gatherings, you know, we get a 0 tolerance for any parties. I know George and everyone has noticed these kids. You know, we had last week on one of our reports, the Gunkwitch Street address came up in Newton. And right away, we reached out to Newton to say, what was it? And basically there was 3 or 4 kids in there watching the Celtics game. So we're doing a lot of follow-up to make sure our kids off campus are behaving. We know everyone's eyes and ears are on us. So we realize we're under a lot of scrutiny, but I want you to know, you know, we're going to have a 0 tolerance. And I think we've already set the tone both off and on campus that we're not going to tolerate large social gatherings. So, you know, you can have assurance on that.
Okay, I'd like
also,
to.
I have got reports, not just BC, but BU of gatherings, and I did forward them to Chief Morgan. And both universities have been very responsive and the messaging and alerting the students that that's not tolerated.
So I'd like to wrap this up unless board members have pressing questions. No? Mr. Kleckner, you have anything to add?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, all of you from BC. And let's keep the lines of communication open. If need be, we will definitely communicate with you.
Terrific, thank you. And I will follow up with the information on the students in Brookline, both undergrad and grad.
Right. But by the way, let me ask one question. I understand that you have this Eagle Pledge. that the undergraduates are required to take. Is that given to the graduate students also? I mean, I went to law school. We can be as irresponsible as anyone.
I believe it was extended out across the entire university, but the undergrads were required to sign that. And they were also, if they lived on campus, they were also required to sign a housing addendum, which mirrored some of the language within the Eagle Pledge, but also added a layer of higher expectations for the on-campus students.
Great. Could you stay around and listen to the public comment? I'm not going to ask you to respond to any public comments, but just listen and take notes so you have a sense of what we're hearing in the community and what you're going to have to make sure that you are responsive to. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
Devin, take them out of the room, and then let's start our public comment section. Segment.
Ryan Black is the first person signed up for public comment, and he has been promoted to a panelist. Ryan, whenever you're ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Thanks, Devin. Hi. There we go. Ryan Black, Precinct 6. I want to actually read a letter from the Boston College Graduate Employee Union. Starting the quote here. To Boston College President William Leahy and Provost David Quigley, the leadership of hundreds of colleges in the United States listened to the most respected scientists and health officials and decided to prioritize the safety of students and employees by making most or all of their courses available for online learning. They recognize the clear risk of forcing their students and employees to learn and work in life-threatening conditions. In contrast, you decided to compel graduate workers, faculty, and other employees to work on campus with little regard for our safety and without our input. We've seen what has happened elsewhere when campuses reopen too soon, and now it's happening at BC. As the recent Boston Globe story illustrates, you have failed to deliver on your promises of frequent testing and sufficient safeguards, and you have broken the trust of graduate workers, our families, our students, our fellow employees. Given this ongoing negligence and failure to adequately organize the safe reopening of the university for its students, workers, and community members, the union makes the following demands in solidarity with our colleagues and fellow members of the BC community. If these demands are not met by Monday, September 21st, we will have no choice but to call for your resignations. I should note here, I'm not a BC student, I'm just reading the letter quote, but to return to it, the Boston College leadership must immediately move all courses possible to online/remote learning and take measures to densify campus wherever possible. Provide all appropriate PPE for every worker whose responsibilities require them to come to campus, including N95 masks, face shields, gloves, etc. Enact a higher frequency of testing for COVID-19, including testing at least twice weekly for all members of the BC community, regularly on campus and on demand for all BC community members, and ensure robust contact tracing within the BC community. Immediately include democratically elected representatives as equal partners in all current and future decision-making around campus safety policy, including graduate workers and other graduate students, undergraduate students, staff, and faculty. Supply written assurances that no employee will suffer a loss of pay or benefits during this pandemic, especially graduate workers and hourly employees. Extend degree deadlines, waive continuation fees for all students at least 1 year, and extend funding and health insurance coverage for all graduate students by at least 1 year. Lives are at stake, and these measures must be enacted before any are lost. Refusal to do so would demonstrate a clear failure of leadership at BC.
You have 30 seconds.
And we'd have no choice but to demand your resignations. So that's the end of the letter. So yeah, I mean, maybe the officials from BC can give public comment, because I'm sure many would be curious what the university has done to address the concerns the student's letter lays out there. Yep, but that's it. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
The next person signed up for public comment is Joanna Klein.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Johanna. I'm a Brookline resident since 1992, and I was briefly living here at age 2. I'm an internist in Brookline, down on Beacon Street, and I'm a BC alumna. I went to BU Med, and I'm mostly Beth Israel affiliated. So a couple of comments. to Mr. Van Scoyoc, I don't really think that we can equate the general Brookline community to the college campuses. As we all know, these people are mostly between the ages of 18 and 22, and they're really not going to behave like the general population of a town. Some may, some are very responsible. Some of them, it's their first time away from home, and they're just not. People's brains aren't even fully developed at the age of 18. So I don't think we can hold them to the same standards. By that same token, we certainly can't hold Boston College to the standards of knowing that to a certain extent, they are functioning in loco parentis. And that means that they really do need to test. They really do need to communicate, not just with the towns in which their school resides and their students reside, but also with the other students. And I think that's very important to know. And, you know, they can certainly look to multiple resources from Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, and the parts of the Centers for Disease Control that have not been censored by the US government at this point. Another issue that I wanted to bring up is that I actually think that to sequester people who have tested positive somewhere like Pine Manor is actually a very good idea, because the worst thing that we can do, though I do understand that due to behaviors, sometimes we need to, is to send people who are testing positive to other parts of the country. We are part and parcel of the United States, whether we like it or not. And our goal as citizens anywhere is both to protect our own communities and to protect our country. And that means we try extremely hard. When we find a positive case, we contact trace and we isolate that person. I do also want to speak to Commissioner Evans, Mr. Evans, who I think he used to be the head of Boston PD, that I'm a little bit worried at the campus of the size of Pine Manor if we have one security person there, because anybody who's been 18 to 22 knows that you can escape out, and many people will occasionally try to do that. So I would urge Boston College to remember that, you know, we all greatly appreciate the colleges and universities in our environment. We need them, our economy needs them, but by the same token, we would appreciate the same respect for everybody's health and livelihood that we would give to all of them, whether we see them in our doctor's offices, we feed them at Anna's Taqueria, or we simply say hello to them as they're walking down the street. So I thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Emma Nash. Emma, you've been promoted to a panelist, and your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
It's good to see all the members of the select board again. My name is Emma Nash. I used to live in Coolidge Corner. I just moved to Washington Square, although today I'm speaking from my mother's house. So in addition to a lot of other things I do in Brookline, I am a master's student at Boston College Lynch School. And I wanted to just offer my perspective on how the first 2 weeks of testing at BC went. Earlier, I can't remember which member of Boston College staff said that every student who set foot on campus in the first 2 weeks had been tested. I was never tested. So what happened was they sent us an email that said we would have a window within these 2 weeks to sign up for testing. And I was out of town with my mom, and so I had to fill out a little form that said I had to delay testing. My next opportunity to be tested was over move-in weekend. And so it was obviously really difficult for me to come to campus and be there. And I missed that window again. And I thought, okay, no problem, because they're gonna have to offer a third testing window. And that window for testing never materialized. So from my perspective, obviously, it's my responsibility as a student to be proactive and get tested, and I understand that. But clearly, we would have an easier time monitoring the situation at BC if walk-in testing was available. And so it's hard for me to understand why walk-in testing has been available at Tufts and why BC hasn't managed to do the same. I understand the logic of feeling that there have to be other criteria for tests after this 2-week window, but like not every college student is going to be proactive about getting tested. Make it as easy and convenient as possible for people to do so, and you'll have an easier time monitoring cases. Yeah, so that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the conclusion of the signups for public comment. This time there are 34 attendees and no one has indicated with the hand raise feature or the Q&A feature that they'd like to make a comment at this time.
Okay, great. To the Boston College individuals, if you'd like to provide the select board with either responses to the public comments or additional information from the earlier question and answer period, please don't hesitate to do so. Send it to the select board office and they'll be distributed to select board members. Mr. Fernandez.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing before we go. You know, I think what is clear to me based on our conversation today is that BC's risk tolerance is higher than Brookline's risk tolerance. And I think the evidence of that is this meeting right here. And the fact that the five of us, even though, you know, it's well within the guidelines established by the state, there are city councils that are meeting in other parts of the state right now in person, the five of us is still determined, along with the town administrator, that it makes the most sense and it is the safest for us to continue to meet in this format, despite some of the drawbacks of meeting only remotely. And, you know, all throughout this time, you know, we've made tough decisions, including decisions that have, you know, hurt the town financially. And we did that to save lives. And we did that to keep people safe. And, you know, BC, BU, and other institutions that remain open to in-person learning have other motivations. And anytime they tell you that their primary focus is on safety, that is just simply not true. If the primary focus was on safety, education can be delivered remotely this year. It absolutely can. It has in the past. It continues to be delivered remotely for those, at least at BU, who choose to be remote. And so, you know, when I say that this is the predictable result of returning students to campus, it's because the colleges have never been able to exercise the kind of command and control over young people that members in the community might hope they'd be able to. So this is the predictable result, is where we are right now. I do think that just looking forward, we're going to have to keep our eyes out because BC is not going to decide to shut itself down, despite the number of cases that may rise there. And hopefully there won't be another outbreak. Hopefully we'll have a vaccine and we'll get past this and everything will be just fine. But in the event that that's not the case, you know, I think this board is going to have to think about what messages we can send and what kind of actions we can take should there be greater spread there or at BU or elsewhere that impacts our community, because I don't know that we can count on those institutions to do what's necessary the way that we have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to miscellaneous items, a question of approving meeting minutes from September 3rd, which was the Thursday meeting we had last week. Any edits to that, those minutes by board members? Now, I sent some edits in and I assume Kate will incorporate them. So I move approval of the meeting minutes from Thursday, September 3rd, 2020, as amended. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, question of approving the application for the following alternate managers for NETA at 160 Washington Street, Brookline: Khalil Page, Carlos Vasquez, and Matthew Perkins. I believe that some of them or all of them are present at our meeting. Board have any questions of them, or would they like to, or would they like to make a statement or introduce themselves? I tell you what, let's start out with Kimberly Daly. Actually, that's someone else, isn't it?
No, it's fine. I'm the person who's the compliance person who submitted all their applications. So if you need any information, I'm happy to help.
Okay, just introduce them, and there's not much to say, but if you want to say anything about this change, please say it.
Well, I mean, it's been, no joke, it's been a bad year. A lot of things have, you know, contributed to layoffs and stuff like that, but we have 3 people who we are nominating for team leads, and one probably for next month who will be our new assistant manager, who have been there for a couple of years and are excellent humans, who are taking on this job in the middle of this pandemic. It's not been easy, but I myself wrote some recommendations for them because I've worked with both of them, all 3 of them actually for about 2 years. And they're some really solid people. So if you need anything, I think Khalil is here, Matthew is here. Carlos is in from his phone because he was unable to get to a computer tonight, but.
Okay, we don't normally ask people to come, I don't think. But given that it's NETA and everyone's concerned about NETA,
Right.
I just wanted to give the board an opportunity to ask any questions, make any statements or whatever.
Sure.
Select board members want to ask questions or any comments? No? Okay.
I have a question. I have a
I
question.
think I think we should point out that the police have reviewed all the applications and find that everything is in order and that none of them are disqualified.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a difference here this year because the police department is not doing the fingerprinting. But they were able to do the Corey checks without. And of course, we always did our own Corey checks. And these are some people I've worked with for a couple of years. They're lovely and very talented. So.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Van Scoyac, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a question about whether there are any future changes in operation that you can tell us about tonight. And for example, I'm thinking about the history that we're all quite familiar with of there being a lot of issues with in the early days of NETA with long lines, problems in the neighborhood from too many cars circling, too many cars being parked, on neighborhood streets, too many incidents of public nuisance. And all of that suddenly improved dramatically during the COVID period because of required changes in NETA's operations. Can we expect that the level of customer arrivals and customer frequency to remain pretty much the same going forward, or do you see a gradual and maybe a more than gradual return to the kind of level of customers arriving daily and hourly that would result in the problems that we saw before?
I can't entirely speak to that. We are under everyone is required to place their order in advance. We have a time schedule for that. We allow a certain number of orders to be placed for any particular, 15-minute or half-hour segment. It is a significant reduction in what we did before, but I am in the compliance department, so that's not my actual, bailiwick. I mean, if you want, I will be happy to speak to some people and get back to you. But for now, we're operating as best we can to keep everyone safe. And it's a fairly, it's a fairly quiet situation. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I move approval of the application for the following alternate managers: Khalil Page, Carlos Vasquez, and Matthew Perkins for NETA. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
So next, authorization to hire. Question of approving the request for authorization to hire a community engagement organizer in the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. Dr. Jeleno,
Hi, good
how are you this
evening.
morning? Or evening?
Good. Good evening, everyone. Name is Lloyd Jalno, Director of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. I'm here this evening seeking authorization to hire a community engagement organizer within the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. As the title indicates, this person will spearhead the town's community engagement plan that is currently being finalized. We are seeking a person that has demonstrated positive results in organizing town and citizen partnerships, with emphasis on engaging people of color in those partnerships. The position will work with town departments, committees, and commissions in developing outreach strategies and to assist in implementation of those strategies. The organizer will also be available for consultation to community organizations as well.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I had a question.
Okay, Mr. Vanscoy.
Laurie, hello, how are you?
Hi, John.
Good to see you. How will we know a year from now if this hire has been effective in achieving goals?
Well, I think the first objective is to help departments and the community establish those goals. So, I mean, I think that will be the benchmark that we actually have goals and metrics set up in place to test and actually seeing that the person is actually going out and establishing relationships with not just the known organizations and entities out in the community, but also creating new ones out there for populations that we haven't been able to reach.
But can you think of any metrics by which we will be able to say there has been clear improvement in community engagement?
I think there are a couple of ways. One is actually doing surveys for satisfaction of community relations and community partnerships with various community entities out there. For example, if we're looking to have a better understanding of certain niche areas, let's say someone who has a disability, for example, and their issues is getting to restaurants and working with those that population, making the determination what the needs are, making sure that we are reaching out to the appropriate people in the town and other folks in the community to come up with a plan to address that issue. Again, one measure is to see how satisfactory that area is, and then moving on to a goal saying, okay, the town will be able to provide more information about facade programs to businesses. And then after, obviously, that our businesses taking that information, listening to the community and making changes. So John, the question you ask is, it's dependent on what the issue is.
Yeah, no, and I'm just thinking about the fact that we're living in a very different environment now, because of remote meetings and remote participation. And there's a word at the bottom of the screen that I'm looking at right now, and it says participants, and it says 29. And so it's automatically logged every time there is any kind of a remote participation meeting involving a Brookline board, commission, you name it. There should be a record of how many participants are at each meeting. And there's even data available because the participants are named. They are identified, and you can actually click on participants and see the list. So it just strikes me that there's plenty of opportunities here to gather data currently and a year from now as to the numbers of participants who are showing up for the regular meetings of various groups, and the demographics of participants who are showing up. So I'm just putting that on the table. It's just one example of a possible metric. I would love to see some metrics because I always find it very hard and a little bit unsettling to, sort of measure whether we have been successful in our goals, for a hire by virtue of, the number of times that this person had an interaction with a department head or something.
But
I don't think that that's kind of what we're looking for.
Right. I do think it goes beyond the numbers. I mean, we're looking at, this person will be out in front in the community in a lot of ways, representing the community. Issues such as, or people feeling like they're being heard, I think is really important. Do people feel like they're being heard and actions being taken? And so metrics that actually delve into that is also important. I do think, well, the organizer will have the expertise to actually help us look at all the variety of metrics that would make us determine whether or not we're being effective with the organizing and our community engagement plan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Quick one, Lloyd. It looks like we're looking for someone here with some real training and expertise, not just someone that's good at talking to people or those kinds of things. Where are the places that that you're going to be looking for applicants for this position, and how can we help?
Well, one of the important things is we want to make sure that the pool that we have is quite diverse in any way possible. So we're looking at we're looking like places like ACLU, people, organizations that deal with a lot of union organizing, community centers that actually go out and do this work. And we have a list that we're pulling together actually right now for to help us broadcast our job description to make sure that we're actually getting appropriate people who can actually do the job. Joan Lancourt has been working with us. She actually helped us formulate the job description. I do want her involved in actually the hiring process too, because she's got a background in community organization, and I think it's important that we tap into that resource. And we're also going to look at for other community members to be part of the interview process as well.
Great, thank you, Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I move approval of the request for authorization to hire a community engagement organizer in the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you, Dr. Jalano.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Next, Fire Chief Contract. Question of voting the Select Board's intent to renew Fire Chief John Sullivan's employment agreement. Mr. Kleckner, you want to present that to us?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So we have a few officials of the town are authorized to have employment agreements with the town. One of them is the fire chief. All of our agreements contain a 6-month provision before the end of the contract that each party indicates their willingness to go into negotiations for a new contract. It is September, 6 months prior to the expiration of this contract, that has to happen. And I strongly encourage and recommend the board to provide Chief Sullivan your intent to negotiate a new agreement and a new 3-year term of appointment. This doesn't bind you necessarily to do that, but I think it's a good faith effort that the contract requires the board to take a vote at this time. So I strongly recommend your providing Chief Sullivan with that intent to renew the employment agreement and his term of appointment at this time.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I don't want to make Chief Sullivan nervous, but I can't help asking. I heard you say it doesn't bind us. So this that leaves open the door for people to change their minds. And I'm sorry if I'm smiling as I say that. I don't mean to suggest we would. But I just want to be clear as to the level of binding or not binding here.
The board is required to make good faith efforts at negotiating an employment agreement, as is he.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of giving him a sense of whether there are going to be problems down the road. It's better to know that earlier than later. Any further discussion?
Well, I would just like to say that I've been involved with the town for a number of years, and Chief Sullivan clearly shines as a fire chief. And I hope he stays forever. And I know that's probably unrealistic, but I think he could give us till at least till he's 100. So that's my only comment.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Hamilton?
I'll just say, I remember when we were searching for someone to replace the former fire chief, and I had the opportunity to sit down with Chief Sullivan as the candidate, and the thing that really made him stand out was his ability to speak to external stakeholders. And there is no one that I think represented Brookline better than Chief Sullivan during COVID. He really was the captain of the ship, and I really truly appreciate his service during this time.
Okay. Well, let's vote.
Oh yeah, I'll say thumbs up from me, but you'll get my thumbs up with the vote.
Okay. I think we all appreciate Chief Sullivan's work in the fire department and around town generally. So I move approval of voting positively the select board's intent to renew Chief John Sullivan's employment agreement. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Great. Boards and commissions, interviews this time. Starting off with the Transportation Board, I see we have Rebecca Salguero Palacios. I hope I pronounced your middle name correctly.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Transportation Board.
Okay, so I come from Spain, but I've been living here for the last 13 years, all of them in Brookline. My background is very diverse. I work as a research technician in Germany, where I also lived 10 years. I have a bachelor in tourism, and I work briefly for Harvard Public School, developing a framework for sustainable tourism connected with public health. And I just finished my master's degree in environmental management. So I've been very involved in the town in different things. I am a board member of the Climate Action Brookline. I also the co-leader of the peer school green team, and I am a task force member, sorry, of the South Routes to School in town, and working on all these very engaged groups. I thought that the Transportation Board is actually a logical next step of public service.
Okay. I'd like to start off with a question I always ask of Transportation Board members. I mean, there's clearly a tension between bikes and bikers and people who drive on the roads to work or wherever they're going. And that tension would be here even if all of our cars were electric and the electricity came from sustainable sources, which it does not now. How do you sort of see that tension, and how should it be managed? It comes up in the context of what streets to be used for, bikes or cars, or more conveniently used for.
Yeah, well, I think the tensions come from probably a lack of infrastructure or a comprehensive plan for both which streets are priority for cars and which streets are priority for bicycles. And the good thing about, if you can say that, about this pandemic is that that it shows a lot of things can happen. I remember there was a lot of outrage just because taking away 2 parking in places, and now suddenly we see that it works and makes room for people and for bikes. So I think, as I said, the problem is that we need to develop a plan so we can make all those groups work together and fit together in the town. But I also see the bikes really as a tool for the town to meet our climate goals. This is a very cheap way of transportation, which gives also equity. It is an active mode of transportation, keeps also this healthy, especially for the kids now during these very hard times without school or remote school, that they need this physical activity. So actually we should also convince the community that this is a good thing, that it doesn't need to be these tensions because we're working together. There are things that sometimes we need the cars because sometimes it's just not possible to use another mode of transportation, especially for people who have disabilities or other people. But there is also room for other kind of transportation modes that are more people-centered, more sustainable. It's also better for the community.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
So you mentioned your servitude on the task force for safe routes to schools. What has that been like, and what do you hope the outcome will be in the short term and hopefully the long term?
Yeah, I've seen that it's a build-up moment, I guess. We started like very, very low, and then we have more school representatives joining the board, and I've seen there are more really the need and the want to do more things. For example, we organize in peers, I think for the first time in the town, walking a school bus, and it was really great. The people saw that is things that you can do. And I think all the people, they were supposed to join also before the whole thing happened to do more of this walking the school bus. So I think that the parents are really demanding more safe routes to schools. And it also, different towns need different things. I mean, town parts need different things. But what I'm really hoping is that we can really develop a plan where you can connect neighborhoods with the neighborhood school, and especially with the high school. I think the high school is one of those, I wouldn't say forgotten, but it's for the whole town, and yet it's very, very far away from the south Brookline for an active mode of transportation, for example. So that what I'm hoping is it's easy for us because we have neighborhood schools and they are somehow close to work and we can make the plan, but also very important for me is also to connect the high school with the whole town in a more sustainable way that we are right now having.
Great. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I just want to beg the board's indulgence right now. I have to step out of this meeting because I'm scheduled to speak briefly to the advisory committee, and I will return. But
Okay, we will excuse you.
I'm going to disappear but reappear in about 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That was my phone saying that it didn't understand something. These phones drive me crazy. Anyway, any other questions from the board? Okay, so Ms. Palacio, we will not be voting tonight, but at a later meeting. But we appreciate you coming forward to this interview, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Emily Jacobson. Okay. Good evening.
Hello.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Transportation Board.
Hi, well, I'd just like to say it's nice to meet you all. I've lived in the Boston area for several years, and my husband and I recently bought a home here in Brookline. I'm in Precinct 5. I hold a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in civil engineering. And for those of you who didn't spend 6 years of their lives being indoctrinated into the idea that all problems can be solved on a spreadsheet, civil engineering is a fairly broad domain, and part of that domain is transportation engineering. So it's part of my background, really, from the most mundane things like designing the grading of roadways to managing traffic flow rates, using origin destination studies to provision mass transit routes, and best practices for safe design of intersections for pedestrians. I currently practice in the domain of structural engineering, and this often touches on transportation. I do a lot of gaming out of designs, trying to look for flaws in them. For example, last year we did a review of a commuter rail station on the South Coast Rail project. And at the moment, I'm part of a team designing an air rights project over the Mass Turnpike down at the intersections of Brookline and Beacon Avenues. There's going to be a commuter rail station at its base, and it's going to be a real transformative project for pedestrians in the area. So that's my professional background. But I don't want you to think that I'm applying simply as a bean counter. I'm applying because I would like to see Brookline maintain and improve its quality of life and its economic well-being in the areas of transportation. And I've been to several transportation board meetings in the past year. People are really worried about the speed and frequency of traffic on their streets. They're finding that roadways that they've known for 30 years are now confusing places to navigate. They're worried about their local shops, how people are going to get to their local shops. And as the previous candidate indicated, people are really worried about their kids walking to school. And I share a lot of these worries. When I take my bike to work, often it's not the best route, and it can be a bit frightening. And I often hear from my colleagues and my neighbors that they would also like to cycle, but they can't find a good route to work. And when I drive, I really notice how the supply of parking in a certain area is going to affect whether or not I choose to shop at those shops. My father recently became disabled, and since then I've really become aware how much disability changes how you can access your neighborhood. So that's kind of my personal background. If I were nominated to the Transportation Board, I would really like to see Brookline continue to develop its transportation as a network. That is to say, not looking at projects just in a piecemeal fashion, one stretch of roadway, but really putting them in their larger context and making sure that they're part of a connected network that works for everyone. And I would also really like to see the Transportation Board broaden its public outreach so that when road changes are coming to a roadway, residents feel that it's their changes that are being made for their community. I don't know if you have any questions now.
Well, I'd like to ask my usual question, tension between bikes and cars. You know, what thoughts do you have? The previous speaker mentioned something that we have been talking about, and that is prioritizing certain roads for bikers, and discourage them from using other roads on routes to downtown. Do you have any thoughts on where that could work?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The Bicycle
Other than the
Advisor
Beacon Street.
Committee, other than Beacon Street.
Right.
Well, yeah. So I think it's really important when designing these routes to make sure that you're thinking of it in a network way. The vast majority of cyclists would prefer to cycle on a nice, quiet, safe route and not be amongst cars. But a lot of the time there's, 300 feet, 500 feet of road that's one way in the wrong direction. And this means that, you either have the choice of breaking the law, which most people don't want to do, or going around and taking one of the busy streets. So I think it's really important to recognize that there is this reality of cyclists and there's this reality of cars that's not going to go away. Like even if you did want that to go away, someone who lives in South Brookline and has their childcare in Coolidge Corner and then works in an office park out say in Burlington, this person is always going to choose their car, and rightly so. And so when we are going to inconvenience people by putting bike infrastructure on a major road, we need to make sure that this inconvenience is targeted, that we're putting it in a place where it really counts for these users. Did that answer your question?
I'd like to follow up, if I could, on this theme. And my fellow select board members are tired of hearing me say this, but my late husband was a cyclist, and he always much preferred going on side streets. For one thing, they were quiet. For another thing, they were pleasant to look at. And for a third thing, they carried a lot less fear of what would happen if you were hit by a car. And he thought it was much more pleasant and less stressful. But I think maybe many cyclists in Brookline don't always realize which streets they could use to get these benefits. And one thing you put your finger on is the issue of a street that changes from in one direction to a one way. And I would think that we would be, if we could develop such a plan, as the previous speaker was talking about, we would have a way of designating certain, quieter streets with contra lanes for bicycles, so that bicycles could go two ways. And wouldn't that solve your concern?
Well, I think you're right to point out that people really would prefer to cycle on roads that are safe and quiet, where they can be relaxed, and also to point out this solution. It is a solution that has been put in place in a number of parts of town.
Correct.
And one of the first
so
things.
Not so much in the town. I mean, I haven't seen plans that specifically target certain streets for bicycles. I mean, I know in other cities, many cities do it, but I don't think Brookline.
But do you mean whole streets just for bicycles?
No, I don't mean whole streets for bicycles, but I mean quiet streets, routes for bicycles that are on quieter streets with much less traffic, one or two cars per every 20 minutes instead of cars constantly. So I mean, I'm not saying cars should be on those streets, but they're never going to be, partly because of the configuration, they're never going to be that popular. And also residents don't like cars. They don't mind bikes because they're quiet. They don't want cars race. They don't want motorcycles. They don't want trucks. They want quiet. So it seems to me that I'm talking more about that. And I had not realized that we have really any specific routes designated for bicycles in the town.
So Brookline actually has a green routes plan that has been developed, and it's a very comprehensive plan that has been developed by the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and also as a part of I can't recall the name at the moment. Complete Streets. The town commissioned a study, and they hired transportation engineers to look at the total inventory of Brookline streets and identify which ones were going to be those low stress, easier to cycle on streets that you're talking about. And I think what's really missing in order to have cyclists choose those streets over the busier streets is indicating how people can use those streets to get from the major draws for people, say from Coolidge Corner to Longwood Medical Center, something like that. It's not indicated, so most people don't know how you can get there in a quiet way. And the other part is making sure that between those draws, there aren't these obstacles of a one-way street or something like that that prevents you using that route. That would be better.
How does the Bicycle Advisory Committee let bicyclists know about these green routes? I don't think that there has been enough public publicity and general community knowledge about this.
Yeah, so I'm pretty, I was given a chance to sit on the Bicycle Advisory Committee coming up this October. So I'm a pretty new member. I've been sitting in on meetings for the past year. From what I understand, the Bicycle Advisory Committee is really just, their mandate is really to advise the Transportation Board when designs come before them. They're not supposed to be advocates to the whole cycling community. That said, they do publish the Green Routes Plan on bicyclingbrookline.org. So it is available to the community, and they work with the Transportation Board and the Transportation Division to identify these routes that need improvement. And the improvement is ongoing. There are a lot of dedicated people working on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we're not voting tonight for this appointment, but at a future meeting, and we will let you know. I appreciate you coming to the select board and being interviewed. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Bernard, before you move on to the next one, can you remind us, and I know I mentioned last week, hopefully we can get a next week cover sheets for each of these when we're doing the interviews, but how many positions are available on this particular board? I know we're about to move to another one. And the length of the term, is it a full, I suppose, 3-year term, or are they finishing out someone's term?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sorry, ahead,
I thought that I had included that in the packet. There are 2 open spots, and they are, one is stepping down, so it would be only a partial term. It would be 2 years as opposed to the full 3, and the other would be a full 3-year term.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I did also want to note for the board that unfortunately Deborah Brown is unable to join us this evening, and she is going to be in touch when a better date comes up for her, and I'll make everyone aware.
Okay, thank you. Kate Torchulin. Did I pronounce that right? It's Torchulin, right?
Yes, good enough, Torchulin.
Torchulin, okay. So introduce yourself and why you're interested in the Economic Development Advisory Board.
Yes, absolutely.
Pardon me? Or as we call it, EDAB.
Yeah, I was wondering the abbreviation. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me kind of join and be interviewed. Kate Torchilin originally come from Russia, from Moscow, was living in the United States now for 27 years and 24 of them in Brookline. And so really developed major appreciation for town. I raised kind of two of my kids grew up here. I intend to be a resident for a long time to come. And so really at this point, having, enjoyed and becoming really big fan of town over the last, more than 2 decades. Now, as we kind of move into further and further into 21st century, and there were various things in the world, including COVID, including the kind of just reading the news, have been certain difficulties, financial difficulties in various programs across town, even before COVID, right? Something that I really felt I would love to step in and be more of a part of the solution so that our great town continues to be really tremendously welcoming and attractive place to live, to study, and to work for many generations to come. So as far as just a little bit more about kind of myself, I have kind of professionally have PhD in biochemistry, have an MBA in general management, work for Thermo Fisher. It's a global company, but with headquarters just outside of Boston, life sciences company. And there I ran a business that, kind of big global business, close to $1 billion with multiple sites, manufacturing sites, research and development sites, office space all across the world. And so through that really have been, I have been exposed to obviously a lot of economic decision and financial decision making, but also how we're trying to attract and build businesses and presences in different places, as well as we've been courted by different communities to be located there. And so kind of understanding this dynamic and what it takes to attract the businesses and kind of build an economic infrastructure that allows various communities to achieve their goals. I've been exposed to that. So let me stop there and see what kind of questions you have.
Well, the board doesn't mind. I'd like to start off with a question. It's sort of off of the presentation you made and deals with a more mundane subject under EDAB's mission. And that is the goal of preserving community and neighborhood character, and the additional goal of increasing the availability of affordable housing. Now, some people see that as being two things that have a little tension between them. What are your thoughts?
So I think overall, right, and that's probably now and into the future, I mean, hopefully there is not a huge delineation between, various areas that are hard and too expensive to live in and areas that are kind of neglected or don't have enough investment or whatever that are typically considered to be affordable, right? So I think the point and the goal is that ultimately we all live in, diverse and inclusive enough environment where there doesn't have to be that delineation, right? And so I do think that build out of affordable housing as it comes in parallel with building out the town that continues investing in various programs, in community programs, in great schools, in just being a pleasant place to live and work and walk around. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. So, but that's, I assume, as part of an art and science that economic development committee is working on. And I definitely look forward to contributing to these discussions.
Okay, I was actually thinking of a situation where when affordable housing projects or projects that include affordable housing come up, we get a lot of pushback from neighborhoods because of size and other things that conflict with the character of local neighborhoods. But any other questions from the select board? You don't want me to ask another question, do you?
What experience have you seen in other communities, if at all, in their quest to try to build more tax revenue? What have you seen worked well?
So a couple of parts, and that I was actually exposed, probably more professionally related rather than to living community experience. But one of my experiences was also in Massachusetts, and through building a local life sciences company here, relying on funding partially through I think it was called Massachusetts Life Sciences Foundation, that was created to attract and build life sciences companies infrastructure in this area. And a lot of focus for these programs was on increasing employment, right? So a lot of process of writing grants and then kind of report out on the success of how the grants were utilized were linked to creating employment in a particular part of Massachusetts. So in my case, it was in Melrose. So that's just one experience. And then a lot of other experiences that we have are typically not just even in the United States and other parts of the world, linked to that increase of first employment, but also creating ecosystems. Again, a lot in my line of work, ecosystems or for co-location of research and development with office space, with manufacturing, such as kind of life sciences companies.
It's funny that you mentioned Melrose. It was just recently featured as one of the hottest zip codes, I think, to move into in the country.
Okay, I didn't see that news, but yeah, no, I think that's
Okay.
Mr. Green, just want to come back very quickly to your comment about just I guess a size of affordable housing developments compared to the rest of the infrastructure. Again, I think a lot of this probably, and I don't want to be superficial, right, or glance over. Obviously, there are a lot of nuances and huge discussions that are being had around such projects. Otherwise, they would have been controversial. A lot of it, though, comes with how much are we as a community can really invest in making those affordable housing projects successful. And they're successful for residents that live there, and they're successful as how they blend both residence-wise and appearance-wise, right, into the neighborhood communities. And so that also does come with, I think, ability and need to invest into these projects, not just look at them as, affordable. And so the more, I think, we create a little bit more of an economic cushion for us to be able to afford some of the additional programs, such as, even appearance-wise, or thinking through better designs that are better for people who live there and better for the communities who live around them. I think the more successful and the more acceptable they will be. So I think, to me, it comes back to really how we're able to attract enough of the base and build enough of economic base to be able to invest much more into other programs that Brookline is kind of known for, wants to do more of.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I appreciate you coming to the select board for the interview, and we will be voting on filling this position at a future meeting, and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now. Okay, Ms. Goff, how are you doing? I take it you're here for the warrant articles.
Yes, but it was just getting good at the advisory committee. I had to leave.
Oh, sorry.
John was
I
just
see
there
Mr.
too.
Mr. Vanskoyak's also back. I hope he made his great presentation at the advisory committee. So, warrant articles, tell us what we have here.
Sure. So the first article that you have in front of you is Wooden Bark. This is an article that normally is done at the annual town meeting, but obviously we were trying to only move the essential items. So Article 1 typically would be an annual town meeting item, but we're moving into the fall.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion of Article 1? Can we vote on that? Okay.
Get it off your plates.
I move favorable action on warrant Article 1, warrant article on the Wooden Bark people. Okay, all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Woof, woof.
Oh, wouldn't you
That's
know?
not. Okay, you know.
The one time your dog should really speak up.
Yeah. He's sleepy. He's too tired.
Has had an opportunity to really have something to say.
Right?
Okay, I take it you voted yes. Okay, Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. So we got Wooden Bark out of the way.
Yes. Next
That was
item.
really tough.
The next item we have is Article 4, which we have on the warrant typically in case we have any unpaid bills that missed the deadline for the fiscal year. I'm happy to report that we do not have any unpaid bills, so my recommendation is a vote of no action.
Okay, I move no action. Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Article 22. Now this will require a little more discussion.
Yep, I believe the petitioners are also here.
Okay. I see Mr. Burstein. Let's see. Looks like Ms. Margolis. Let's see. I'm trying to find that here.
Are you going to take up Articles 22 and 23 together? Is that, are they the same?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. The petitioner is okay with that? Slight differences. Okay, good. Okay, introduce yourselves and state your thinking. I see, okay, Ms. O'Connor didn't recognize you.
Hi,
So Ms. Margolis, why don't you start off?
Sure. So good evening. I'm Hadassah Margolis, town meeting member of Precinct 8, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. In 2017, town meeting voted in favor of a resolution to replace gender-specific language by town government and to amend the bylaws and to change, quote, Board of Selectmen to, quote, Select Board. In 2019, town meeting voted to replace, quote, chairman with gender-neutral, quote, chair in our bylaws. So warrant articles 22 and 23 are the next logical step, replacing gender-specific pronouns in our general and zoning bylaws with gender-neutral ones. So replacing he, him, his, and she, her, hers with they, them, theirs. The mechanics are simple. It is a universal search and replace for pronouns in minor verb agreements. The motion that Neil distributed earlier today, detailing each instance, shows that there is no confusing syntax and there is no change to the substance of the laws. Our laws remain the same, but importantly, our bylaws and our town government become more inclusive. Pronoun changes don't change the letter of Brookline laws, but they do change the spirit of our laws. By voting in favor, you will make a powerful statement about our commitment to representation, inclusivity, and equity.
Okay, Ms. O'Connor, you want to add anything?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'd like to go next.
Okay, Burstein.
Thank you. I'm Michael A. Burstein, town meeting member from Precinct 12, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I have been in town meeting since 2001. As many of you know, and as Hadassah noted, 3 years ago, I worked on changing the name of the Board of Selectmen and to help, in the end, creating a gender-neutral term. Gender-neutral language is important to help people, all people, feel included. For many years, people defaulted to using the male pronouns of he, him, and his, which created a society where most people would envision the standard person as being of one specific gender. And in fact, studies showed for years that people viewed the generic scientist or politician as male. And this influence is one of the many factors that kept non-male people from reaching for their goals. But it's not just a question of male and female. Throughout history, there have been non-binary people who do not get to be their authentic selves, and this led to depression and sometimes, sadly, suicide. Today, we do acknowledge that non-binary people exist and that he and she no longer includes everyone. People need to see themselves as scientists, presidents, and full members of society without bias. And it is past time that we acknowledge this in the town bylaws. Thank you.
Ms. O'Connor, would you like to add anything?
Yes, very quickly. So again, my name's Catherine O'Connor. I use they, them pronouns, they, them, theirs, and I'm about to start my senior year at Brookline High tomorrow morning. And I consider myself an LGBTQ plus advocate in our state. And I've always seen myself as a community leader in Brookline and in our Commonwealth. But time and again, I've had to give myself voice in state house offices, at hearings, in public policies, in my own classrooms at Brookline High. And adults have frequently redirected me away from activism and politics, telling me to stay in my lane and enjoy my youth. And these comments and the unnecessary stress of having to make space for myself as an equal citizen in our Commonwealth is just unacceptable. I should be able to see myself just like everybody else in Brookline, reflected in our public servants, in our laws, in our bylaws. For example, I did not want to get an ID at all because I knew that the gender marker on my ID would not be accurate to the person that I know myself to be. But the day after the DMV announced that it would allow for an X gender marker on driver's licenses, I went in and I took my permit test. And now I've become the friend in my group that drives all the other friends around. And I've unfortunately become the sibling who's in charge of going to the grocery store and driving my brother to soccer. But none of that would have been even in my peripheral or a possibility for me, even if I hadn't seen myself reflected in my own documents.
Okay, are there any issues or controversies that are going to arise around these warrant articles? I remember last time, there were not necessarily controversies, but a lot of discussion as to exactly how the article should be written.
Hadassah, do you want to take this one, or?
I don't, Chair, is that a
Is that addressed to us,
for
Chair?
us or
Yes.
just in general?
Well, I'm asking, is there anything we need to discuss? Maybe that's really the question. I mean, these articles seem fairly straightforward, but one never knows. There may be something we're missing.
Well, if you have a chance to look through the detailed motion that was sent, Neil and I went through every single instance, and it was pretty straightforward. And we left comments to the couple of places where there could be some ambiguity, but it's kind of a stretch that it was ambiguous.
Okay,
yeah.
any questions from the board?
I'll just say briefly, I think this is a great development, a long time coming, certainly in line as town meeting member Margolis mentioned, in line with many of the changes that we've made previously. I think some of our challenge moving forward is going to be to get folks in position of power to adopt this language. There are a couple different ways to go about doing this. One is to do as I did with Hadassah, is to refer to her by her title, and I do know her pronouns, and she gave them to us earlier. But another way is to simply, if we're not sure, or if we don't know, not if we're not sure, if we don't know, is to simply refer to the person by their first name or to ask what their pronouns are, and then to refer to them by their pronouns. So there's some education that I hope will come along through the process leading up to and at town meeting. But I think there's going to need to be some education after this passes. I'm confident that it will. And we're going to need to make sure that I've seen this before with some people that just say, I don't know, it's been selectmen the whole time I've been around. I'm just going to keep using selectmen, which might be fine for someone just on the street. But when we're, conducting business, whether it be in town meeting, at these meetings or elsewhere, I think that we need to hold people to these resolutions or these, in this case, warrant articles that pass. And within our own policies as well. So hopefully we'll find some way throughout this process and even after to engage in some education so people know, as Catherine pointed out, is critical to people's lived experience and them feeling affirmed in their identity and being able to participate fully in our democracy. So fully supportive of this, and thanks for bringing it our way.
Yeah, and I support it too. I think we just a warning. We should not fail to be respectful of people who may take a while to get used to, the new language. There's been some conversation around town that I think was not respectful, not recognizing that someone who's been saying, I don't know, he for 70 years may have a little while before they, can train their tongue and their mouth muscles to use a different pronoun. So, hopefully we have enough, hopefully people will be respectful as we go through this process of changing the terminology that we use, both in written documents as well as formal and informal speech. So
I'll just add that in my experience, people who identify outside the gender binary have been extremely patient with people adapting to changes in the way that they've identified people by gender. So I expect that'll continue. But hopefully, by the same token, those of us who are learning a different way, including many people in town meeting, for instance, who have JDs and PhDs and have critical thinking skills and you name it, are able to put the work in to actually make these changes.
Mr. Burstein.
Yes, Mr. Green, in that spirit, I just actually realized there's something I don't know. I would just like to ask my colleague, Catherine O'Connor, what honorific do you use? Mr. Green used Ms. for you before, and I actually don't know what you use. Would you be willing to tell us?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Michael. A common honorific for folks who identify outside of the binary, as opposed to Mr., Miss, or Mrs., is mix, spelled MX. And so that's my preferred honorific.
Okay, thank you. I submit to you, Mr. Chair, that Mix O'Connor has been very patient right now, and that people will continue to be patient with people. I will tell you personally, I took a few years to learn about using gender neutral language for specific individuals myself. I cannot tell you the number of times I've used the phrase, she's actually they now, as I'll keep referring to somebody who is a they, and they have still used she. But if I've done it to a person's face, I've always apologized and simply moved on, and they've moved on. The other point I do want to make, though, is that the bylaws are referring, of course, to people in general. So it is one thing when we refer to a specific person, and that is something that we are trying to learn to do more and more. But by removing he and she from the bylaws and replacing with they, it's actually a long-standing tradition. I can give you sources from the Oxford English Dictionary. Actually, with your access to the Brookline Public Library system, you can get free access to the Oxford English Dictionary, and you can find how they actually has served as a singular pronoun for the general person for many centuries. And it may have gone into disuse a lot during the 20th century, but it's coming up again. So I think that, I think people can and will continue to be respectful in both parts. I will note that our town moderator, Sandy Gadsby, actually has for a few years continued to refer to the Board of Selectmen and during town meeting, and in general we have been, very respectful of the fact that it is a change for somebody to have to come to. And I think a lot of us in town understand that.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'm fully supportive of this. I think we should vote.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's vote on both articles.
Mr. Chair, hold on. These all require public hearings. These are warrant articles that
Oh, okay. It's
might have a public hearing, each one.
okay. Okay. It's not in the agenda, but you're right.
Yeah.
This is a public hearing. Ms. Williams, do we have anyone in the queue to speak to these articles, either Articles 1, 4, 22, or 23? And with respect to Article 25, I understand that this may be being withdrawn, so it's taken off of our agenda today. If it is withdrawn, it won't reappear. If it is not withdrawn, it'll come back at a later date. So,
Chair, you said 25, but you mean 35, is that right?
yeah, 35. Did I say 25? I'm sorry. Okay, Devin, do we have people in the queue who want to speak?
Yes, Ryan Black has signed up to speak on the warrant articles that you were just addressing.
It's a public comment. I want to speak. Yeah, if 35 is withdrawn, then I can keep this brief. Yeah, Articles 22, 23, really good ideas. And Budget Justice supports them. That's all I'll say then. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Any other comments at this public hearing? No? Come on.
Yeah, at this time there are 12 attendees and no one has raised their hand or used the Q&A feature to indicate that they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, good. Okay. I hereby close the hearing on Articles 1, 4, 22, and 23. Any further questions from the board or discussion or comments? Okay, let's vote. Favorable action on, we've already voted Articles 1 and 4, but actually let's vote favorable action on all 4 articles because we didn't have the public hearing with respect to 1 and 4. So I move that we vote favorable action on warrant articles 1, 4, 22, and 23 in omnibus fashion.
Bernard,
yes.
the recommendation on Article 4 is no action.
Oh, okay, you're right. Okay. So, let me rephrase that. I move that we vote favorable action on Article 1, 22, and 23. All in favor? Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Now, I move we vote no action on warrant Article 4 because we have no unpaid bills this year. I wish my finances were like that, but they're not. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay.
Article 35 is next, and as Bernard has stated and stole my thunder a little, 35 is withdrawn, so we have one less article to deal with, and so the recommendation under Article 35 is no action.
Okay. So I move no action on Article 35, resolution to increase residential property tax exemption, which has been withdrawn permanently, right?
I believe they don't intend to make a
Okay.
motion under this article.
The correspondence was not specific, but okay. So I move no action on warrant Article 35. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay,
Thank you.
next, special town meeting number 2, which
So
is our special town meeting for all the financial articles that we want to make sure we end before the end of the year, so we don't get in deep trouble. Okay, Article 3, Newberry acquisition. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Article 3 should be very familiar to the board because we did deal with this at the annual town meeting and it passed successfully. Unfortunately, there was a contingency built on the vote that required a debt exclusion within a certain time frame, 90 days. Given all the issues in the town clerk's office, it made this board has decided to have the vote in November. As a result, we need town meeting to reaffirm the Newbury vote, and we will actually have knowledge of the results of the election in hand in that time. And I think Nancy had a few comments also on this article, so I'll let her add to that.
Okay, well, you've really covered it, Melissa. Thank you. Because actually it was a combination. I mean, not only was the clerk's office struggling with the whole new mail-in vote system, understaffing, etc., but the Secretary of State did not look favorably on our putting a local question on the primary ballot because there are 4 different ballots then, and he felt that it would be too confusing. So the result is that we needed, because of the Newbury agreements, we need to have the vote by the end of the year. We need to have this voted at the November federal election, basically, and which will consist of many candidates, federal, state, county, etc. And 2 questions that are statewide. Those are questions 1 and 2. And question 3 will be the Newbury question. So that will just be local. And it asks the same question before, ask the voters to exempt from Prop 2.5 the purchase of the west side of Newbury. And while it won't say this in the vote, the purchases for 14.9 million. When you spread that across the town, it comes out to very, very little money per person. I think it's less than $5 a month for a household, for a single family household, and less than $3 a month for a condo. So anyway, we're proceeding to educate the voters about that. We'll have, as Melissa said, we'll have the vote November 3rd, and we will be able at town meeting. I mean, this already passed pretty overwhelmingly at town meeting in June, so I don't expect that it would, if we pass it on November 3rd, then I believe that there will be absolutely no issue in terms of the vote at town meeting.
The board should also have in their packet a memo from me. I took the liberty of putting the article in a form of the motion. Essentially, it's the same vote that you took for the annual. The only difference is that the contingency language has been struck. We also ran this by bond counsel to make sure that it was conforming with their standards as well. So that's
okay. The language in the materials is like 4 pages of legal stuff.
You can just refer to my memo when you're making your motion if that's simpler.
Okay. Any further questions from the board before we open up to public comment? Okay, this is a public hearing. Ms. Williams, do we have anyone in the queue waiting to be heard?
This time there are 11 attendees. No one has raised their hand or used the Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment at this time.
Okay, we'll give them a few seconds. Okay, I hereby close the hearing. Any further questions from the board? Okay. I move approval of Article 3, Newbury acquisition, as described in the memorandum from Melissa Goff, dated September 15, 2020. Move that the select board is hereby authorized to acquire land located at 110 Fisher Avenue, as further described in great detail in Ms. Goff's memorandum, with legal description and other description of the parcels to be acquired. All in favor? Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vascoya?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Okay, next, this is not a hearing, Devin, or is it? The
Are you talking about
inflammables license?
item
Oh, I'm
9?
sorry, it says public hearing. It is, so it is a public hearing. Okay. So question of approving the application for Kinwood Investments LLC, 120 Braintree Street, Boston, for the keeping, storage, and use of 6 parked cars at 287 to 291 Tappan Street. That means cars with gasoline in them in a garage. Let's see, who wants to present on that? Mr. Kleckner, or you, or do we have the representatives of Kinwood Investments here?
The invitation was extended for them to attend, but it does not look like anyone has joined us.
Okay. Mr. Kleckner, would you like to tell us what this is? And
Well, I don't have a lot of details, but as you know, whenever there is accumulation of vehicles within a building, in this case, an underground garage, it exposes the applicant or that property owner to a license, an inflammables license. That license is required to be signed off by the local fire department, which I believe this one is. Unfortunately, I just don't know that much about the property. It appears to me that is this under construction at this time? I don't know.
okay, are they required to be here for us to vote on this, or?
I would be here if I was seeking a license.
Well, okay, but are they required?
No, I don't think it's legally required, no.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I guess the materials clearly tell us what's going on here. It's not really anything particularly out of the ordinary. We do these all the time. Anyone have a problem with just voting irrespective of the fact that they're not here? No? Okay, then I move approval of the application for Kinwood Investments for the
Just make
keeping.
sure you convene the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I did. Okay, this is a public hearing. Devin, anyone else in the queue to make public comment?
There are 10 attendees at this time, and no one has indicated they'd like to make a public comment.
Okay. Give it a few seconds, then I hereby close the public hearing. And unless
Losing our audience.
Pardon me?
We're losing our audience. We've got to spice this thing up a little bit.
Let's just go through it and get off the meeting or get out of the meeting. Okay, unless there are any further questions from the select board or comments, all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanskoya?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, next, fossil fuel-free working group discussion. Mr. Kleckner, explain what this is and how you're approaching it.
Sure.
We all
Well,
know what it is, but
yes, this is 3 weeks now where we've attempted to develop a process whereby the town would generate a report on various potential incentives in order to compel fossil fuel-free construction in our community. And I had 2 weeks ago attempted to try to resolve that, and last week we had some further discussion and proposals. I will tell you, I've struggled with this a little bit, and the reason being is the primary reason is that I'm worried about the presence of an ongoing open meeting and working group that will kind of be the same as an advocacy, the kind of advocacy that I think we would like to avoid, at least until some of the data and some of the analysis can be done. Having said that, it is important for the planning department, in this case, it's the planning department we propose do this study, to hear from folks. And so, initially I was talking about an informal working group. I'm advised that really there's no such thing. If it's a working group that's been designated, there's a chair, there's ongoing meetings, regular meetings. It really is an open meeting, and that's frankly what I'd like to avoid. And so what I have done is I have essentially replaced the term or the concept of a working group to a working process. I think it involves a lot of the same people, but it's not an ongoing process or an ongoing group that would be subject to the open meeting law. What I'm thinking about is a periodic opportunities for all these groups to have the ear of the planning department and other staff who's working on this project, and give them a full evening or whatever it takes to make their point, to submit their data, identify studies that they might want to be looked at that can demonstrate success in incentivizing fossil fuel-free construction. So that's one part. I think the second part, which I believe will ensure that the report will generate a wide range of options, is the vote that the language of the vote. And so I'm requiring that the report in the board's proposed vote will address all of these possible incentives, including all the zoning incentives proposed by the petitioners. That doesn't mean necessarily that they would recommend those, but they're going to identify all of these options in their report. Second thing is I'm asking the planning department to report monthly to the select board to see how things are going. It will give you the opportunity to hear from both the planning department as well as other people who may be aggrieved by the process and who are saying, we haven't heard enough, haven't been given enough opportunity to have our input. We want to hear that if that's the case, and we want the board to hear that. And then finally, we would have a public hearing, formal public hearing before the finalization of the vote, or excuse me, the finalization of the report. And once the report is been published and submitted, which hopefully will be a very good objective analysis of a lot of the alternatives, then I think the board has to decide, how it's going to get from there to actually fashioning proposals to adopt, whether it be by the select board, the planning board, or probably more likely town meeting. So I have put together a new vote. It's not a lot different than the last one, but it does, exchange the term and the concept of working group with a working process. Having said that, I'll answer questions. I believe Allison Steinfeld from the planning department is available to answer questions and identify some of her thoughts about how that would actually be implemented in a work plan.
Yeah, I'd like to just say that changing working group to working process is just a change of words. But the point is that we're, as a select board, directing the planning department to do their work, as they always do, but do their work in terms of putting together a report. The only thing different is that we're also directing them to just go out of their way to engage with people who have an interest in this issue and get their input and make sure that that input is incorporated into the work that they do. I don't see this as in any way a structured committee or anything. It's just a way that we're asking the planning committee or planning department to do their work on this subject. Ms. Steinfeld, do you want to add anything? You're muted.
Allison Steinfeld, Planning Director. Actually, the way you presented it, Chairman Green, is really consistent with any planning process that we'd undertake as a planning department. Basically, what we're thinking, and it's still at the early stages, we want to flesh it out a bit, but we're thinking that during our first phase of in which we're going to conduct research and gather information. We're going to have, perhaps we'll call them charrettes, with some of the constituencies to get a sense of the sharing information, some working meetings. And as we progress through the process, I think we might like to rely on some of our existing committees, not only to hear their input, but perhaps, and we'll think this through a bit more, some of those committees actually hold some public hearings so that the committees themselves can entertain public input and further inform their advice to the planning department. So and I appreciate the fact that the town administrator listened and engaged town council and building commissioner and me as we talked this out, because it makes sense as a planning process. It is a compressed time period, but we can do it, and we will do it.
Okay, any other discussion from the board?
If I could just add one thing with what Allison said, it is a compressed time frame, but I felt that it was important because we're really talking about a very distinct two-step process. One is to prepare the report, hopefully with a lot of input, but the second part is really we need to generate some consensus and decisions about what to put forward to town meeting and other things. And that's going to take a little bit of time. I think there's a sufficient amount of time after the report is submitted. It's probably another almost 2 months worth of time, and I think that will work.
Any further comments from the board before we?
I'll comment. I do think that last time I raised the issue of needing to comply with the open meeting law and the onus of that, because it can be really slow the process down, which is valuable in some respects, but in this respect, no. I think this is so I think this is a better word. I think this is a better idea, a better way of going forward.
Okay.
I wanted to say a couple words, if I may. I appreciate Allison's comment. We can get this done. I hope I've quoted her correctly or paraphrased her correctly. And I just, every now and then, I feel the need to just remind myself and remind others what's at stake here. Let's keep in mind that today there was visible haze in our area from the smoke from the fires that are burning on the West Coast. That's how devastating this has been. I'm just going to quote a few facts from some of the recent coverage. More than 5 million acres of burns. You've got leaders in Oregon, California, and Washington pleading for help. Tens of thousands of people displaced. 27 at least are dead. Flights canceled because of this shroud of smoke. Neighborhoods smothered. Parts of the Western US declared the dirtiest air on the planet. And this is just a poignant vignette from coverage of a walk through the destroyed town of Phoenix, Arizona, and description by one of the residents who returned to the town to try to recover some of her stuff. Trying to describe the destruction, really the only words I can come up with are absolute, he said, excuse me. These folks' homes, I mean, they want to come back to sift through their stuff, but there's nothing left to sift through. I'm tired, really tired. But you know, anytime I take a break, my sadness gets worse. This is what we're facing right now. This is the manifestation of the climate crisis. And I just want to add to what Allison said. If in the face of a crisis this urgent, we can't find some way within our zoning code to incentivize fossil fuel-free construction, then I would say we're not trying hard enough. I trust that we will find a way. But it would be unacceptable to simply say at the end of this process, gee, we just couldn't find a way. We need to find a way, and I trust that we will find a way.
Any other comments, questions?
I'll just jump in. I am delighted to hear from staff that they recognize that this is a priority from this current sitting select board. We definitely want to be out front on this issue. There's a lot at stake, as Mr. Van Scoyac stated. But, you know, as a sitting select board member, I realize I should be responsible with staff time and hear you when you say you've got a lot on your plate. So I deeply appreciate that you are elevating this to the priority that the rest of us feel is necessary at this point in time.
If I may say, I think there's a genuine commitment on the part of everyone in the planning department to get this done. But I must also say that there will be adjustments in our work program for the next few months in order to do it. And also, as far as I'm concerned, we're not going to waste any time focusing on the need to address the issue. We're going to take that as a given and not spend any time lamenting the obvious. I mean, it's obviously sad.
Yeah. And if I may, for myself, use that to say that for the record, I don't like recitals. They are attempts to lock people into one limited way of thinking many times. But I'm going to set that aside for purposes of this resolution. I see that Mr. Gray and Ms. Cunningham are in the meeting. Do you have anything to add?
Sure, yeah. Appreciate everyone's hard work on this. And although he's not one of my favorite presidents, I'm going to take a Ronald Reagan moment here, which is to say that on this one, it's going to be trust and verify. So first of all, we're going to trust this process, even though, you know, to be honest with you, it's not the easiest thing for us to trust. And that's not because we don't love the town administrator, the board, you know, the planning director. We do. But you know, this is ambitious what we need to do here. And actually, we had a memo from the planning department from just a few weeks ago, August 21st, that was in the packet, which was, I would say, threw a little bit of shade on this idea. And so we will trust this process. We support this process. We will be participating. We'll be working alongside. And we share John's hope that this will produce something that can, you know, that is up to the task that we face, not just kind of on the margins that a few projects might go fossil fuel free, but incentives that would be really effective and that could be a model for other communities as well. So we'll be there to help the process along the way. And if there's nothing that comes out of it that is up to the task, you know, we will be still here, and we will still be putting things forward that we think are up to the task. So with that, I would just be curious. I would be curious to hear from the planning director, you know, how this analysis moving forward would differ from some of the comments and concerns in the memo.
Well, first of all, per the town administrator's memo, we are in fact going to look at the proponent's proposed zoning, and we are going to further analyze it. We're also going to look and remember that the regulatory staff within the planning department, the representatives of the building department, and the representatives of the law department know zoning in this town really better than anyone, because they use it every single day. And there are other possibilities. We've identified some, perhaps. We have to look at it further. There may be others. And quite honestly, we're not going to just look at zoning. We're certainly going to very aggressively look at zoning, but we're going to look at other incentives as well. We're going to try to identify other possibilities. It's going to be a reasonably exhaustive study, as exhaustive as we can do in a few months, to lay everything out there. And I certainly look forward to your expertise, Jesse, as well as the expertise of a lot of other people in Brookline. And we're going to be relying on your, not only your information, your input, but your feedback on what we're examining. I won't even say proposing, because we're not going to, I don't even know if we're going to propose anything. I mean, we may not recommend anything. We're going to provide the information for the decision makers to make the decision. But I can't predetermine the report at this point because we haven't begun it.
Good.
So I have a few questions about the process, if that's okay, just to, because we just got this memo this afternoon. We really haven't had much of a chance to digest it. And so the way this started was that we actually had a zoning warrant article that we were ready to submit. And then we were told that we hadn't engaged enough with the staff, we hadn't engaged enough with planning, that it would really be better if we had some time to do that engagement process. And we actually thought, you know, that's a good idea, because we actually, as I mentioned before, we're working with over a dozen other towns and cities who are exploring the same issues. We've also working with a handful of lawyers. We've been exploring these issues for the past month and a half. So we thought that was a really good idea. And my impression of the way we started was that we were going to have a working group, and that was going to be something along the lines of what we did with warrant article 21. And I think it's good to bring up that comparison, because when we started with warrant article 21, we really had unanimous opposition. And it's something that basically what happened is we brought this idea, and then through engagement with a lot of town staff, a lot of people in planning and legal and building department, we got a lot of information that actually made this idea a stronger idea. And now I think the group that was working on this original zoning warrant article still has a lot of ideas that we haven't even put forward yet. And we'd like to do the same exploration of these ideas, along with other ideas that other people in the community might have, and that people in the planning department might have. And we've been thinking of this as being, again, a very collaborative process where we're really trying to figure out what is possible without making a judgment on anything before we've done sort of a full analysis, just analyzing. And in the end, we might not know exactly what is going to work or what's not going to work. But what we want to do is just the analysis. And then what we want to do is then bring the analysis would become the report. And then whoever wants to carry forward different ideas in this report and make those into warrant articles would be able to do that. And maybe it would be a group, some of these ideas might be adopted by the select board, some might be adopted by groups of citizens. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I think that's the process that we originally envisioned. And what I'm not sure about now, is this the same process that we're going to have, or is this now a different process?
We cannot duplicate the process that we undertook for warrant article 21. We don't have the staff time, and we don't have the time in general to do that. In order to focus on zoning, we need regulatory staff who aren't normally assigned to sustainability. This is a well-designed process, but it's going to involve a number of constituencies. It will not just involve the specific proponents of the warrant article. I'm being upfront with you.
Well, but I would say, Lisa, to your specific question, yes, at the end of the day, there's going to be a report, and hopefully it'll be a very helpful report with a lot of data and options and analysis. And then, people can decide how they want to take those concepts from the report and convert them into proposals. That's how I perceive the process.
If I may, as a petitioner of warrant articles, and now sitting on the select board, I think it's important to understand the differences when you are either a town meeting member or you are a citizen petitioner on a warrant article. You're given a lot of latitude as to how fast you can work, who you can bring together when it's a warrant article. When you start to involve the town and it is a select board initiative, we have to abide by a completely different set of rules. And that means that we have to set agendas, 2 days in advance, post them publicly. We have to organize around everybody's schedule. The process gets drawn out quite a lot. And we're about to head into a town meeting that has 39 warrant articles and 2 or 3 special town meetings. So just so that we're all aware of the different rules that apply to what was done under warrant article 21 last year and this process now that the town of Brookline is the sponsoring agent.
Good.
I get that difference, but I'm still concerned because I'm looking at the memo that we got from the planning department on August 21st, where basically it just went through and basically said that the ideas that we'd already brought forth on incentives, basically we're not going to work. And so I guess I'm just confused at, what sort of assurances do we have that this process that I know that Mel, thank you very much for putting all this work into this, but what types of assurances do we have that this is going to be a collaborative process where we're just exploring these ideas and then bringing the results of this research back in the form of a report, instead of what I really don't want to see happen is evaluating these ideas before we've researched them. I think we need to research them. I think that needs to be collaborative. The people who've been working on this obviously can spend a lot of time and effort in helping to do that. But then I think we need to keep an open mind and bring back the report should be based on what has been found out. Sorry, that's it.
Yeah. Well, let me, Allison, if I could, please. So we're not going to take back that memo that the planning department wrote. I think you have to understand that was in the context of the select board being asked to sponsor a specific set of warrant article or a specific warrant article. I think the fact of the matter is the planning department wasn't the only one. The board received a lot of commentary, and I think it influenced them. It influenced them that maybe this needs more analysis and more collaboration. So that's the intent of this process. The proof of the pudding will be, I guess, when you see the report. But as I mentioned, the planning department is going to give an update every month to the select board. And if you don't feel like you're being heard, or for some other reason you think that the planning department or other people are not listening, you should let the select board know. But I wanted to point out on the third bullet of the proposed vote that I have. It says, planning department report shall evaluate a range of zoning incentives to influence FFF construction in all zoning districts of the town, including but not limited to potential bonuses for height, floor area, and so on. So been pretty prescriptive about what the report has to include.
I'll just jump in and just say, that's the thing that Mel just mentioned is the thing that I really appreciate about what you put together. I don't know. I like the clauses, Bernard. I think those are great too, to add some context to this. And, you know, I think if we all as a board vote affirmatively on this, I think there's some skepticism about whether or not, you know, what we're saying we want right now is what is going to end up as the end result. You know, certainly I've heard a number of board members, not just this week, but in previous weeks, you know, express the idea that you know, I'm one that says recommendations are great. I want options. So I like the idea that this report is going to produce a number of options, including some that might not have ended up on our plate if we would have just asked for recommendations. So I think, you know, I think what Mel says is correct, is that we've got to work the process. If folks feel like they're not getting a fair shake, you know, let us know and we'll revisit. But I expect that that the community engagement is going to happen as part of this process in the way that Allison outlined it. Let's go.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? So I move approval of Mr. Kleckner's motion as written, despite my misgivings. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. So next, boards and commissions appointments. We've interviewed these people and now they're coming before us to be appointed. See, we have 3 people for diversity, inclusion, and community relations, and we have a slate for the Commission on Aging, or Council on Aging. Is anyone going to present this to us?
Well, I'm not sure what you, so for the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission.
I guess the question is, I guess I'm asking you to present the applicants to us so we can vote on them.
Okay, well, I'll do that. I'll take them in the order and listen for your vote. Robert Lepson.
Aye.
Aye.
Cornelia Vanderseel.
Aye.
And Samuel L. Batchelder.
Aye.
I believe I've heard majority votes for all those 3 candidates, so they've reappointed. The next, Mr. Chair, is the Council on Aging, and in this case, the bylaws require the Select Board to receive recommendations from the Council on Aging. And so the Council on Aging has a nominating committee, and they've submitted a memo to you on August 21st with recommending a series of appointments to regular members, to associate members, and associate members. So you know, if you're inclined, you could just, I think, vote to adopt the recommended slate that's included in this memo.
Okay, does anyone object to doing that?
Can I just, this is the first time I'm seeing something like this. Is there a rationale for why we do this particular council differently than we do some of the other boards and commit, or just written in the bylaws that way?
Well, that is the bylaws. You know, there are some other examples of that, but I can't think of them offhand. But you know, anytime there's a appointed or elected board, from time to time, there is something in the bylaws that require the select board to consider.
So let me just say that I have been the board's liaison to the Council on Aging. I think pretty much since I got on the committee, or maybe I took over for Nancy Bailey. And this is the way it's been done. It's a group that works well together, and you know, this people sign up for it. I think it would be a little more onerous on us and them if we were to have individual applicants and go through the process the way we do for other boards. So I think we should, continue with this process. And, as I say, there have been no problems with it in the past.
I'd say maybe it might be more helpful if in the future we get, and I'm not saying for today, but in the future, if we were able to get some more context other than a list of names and addresses, maybe the racial gender balance, other identifiers that might just help us understand that that this has been an inclusive process where those factors are considered in the appointments that come before us. This just right now it's just a list of names.
Great, good idea.
We could convey that to Ruth Dobeck and Yolanda Rodriguez. Yolanda is the chair of the Council on Aging. And, these folks have all been on the Council on Aging for many, many years, really. I don't think there's been a new face there for a while, but any new faces are welcome and come to the meetings, and the meetings are always well attended, even on Zoom. So, I think, I can convey that to Ruth Ann and Yolanda.
And I think that there are two new associate members. We have citizen members and associate members, and two new people are being submitted. So, but it's a good point, and I'm sure Ms. Dobeck will follow up on it in the future. So, any other discussion on about this? No. I move approval of the slate of nominations for the Council on Aging as appears in our packet. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Commission on Diversity include, oh, we already did that.
I think we're done.
We're done. I hereby end this meeting.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I just wanted to take the privilege of correcting something I said earlier. I believe I misspoke and said Phoenix, Arizona. It was Phoenix, Oregon, and I should have said Phoenix, Oregon.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Phoenix, Arizona is a pretty big town.
I figured if I didn't correct myself, somebody would call me on it. And
well, yeah, everyone thought, well, maybe he's right. I mean,
you can fool some of the people some of the time.
yeah. Okay. See you later, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good evening, everybody.